The 10th of May, 1940, World War II, the Netherlands. Nazi Germany invades Holland, and the German air forces, the Luftwaffe, use paratroopers in the capture of tactical points and to assist in the advance of ground troops across the country. This invasion is accompanied by heavy aerial bombardment of Rotterdam and culminates on the 14th of May with the destruction of its entire historic center. Because the Germans threatened to bomb the city of Utrecht in the same way, the Dutch forces surrender one day later. Soon after, the Nazis start to occupy the whole country and pass new anti-Jewish laws, which are designed to exclude Jewish people from society and restrict their livelihood. 15,000 Jews who fled from Nazi Germany to the Netherlands between 1933 and 1939 are once again under Nazi domination. One of them is a Jewish teenager, Margot Frank, whose sister, Anne, would become one of the world's most famous diarists. Margot Betty Frank was born on the 16th of February, 1926 in Frankfurt, Germany, to Otto and Edith Frank. Margot also had a sister, Anne, who was 3 years her junior. The sisters had a happy childhood, playing almost every day in the garden with the children of their neighborhood. The Franks were liberal Jews and lived in an assimilated community of Jewish and non-Jewish citizens of various religions on the outskirts of Frankfurt. Their life changed dramatically when on the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party, was appointed Chancellor of Germany by the German President Paul von Hindenburg. The Franks remembered well how in the summer of 1932, members of the SA, which was the paramilitary organization associated with the Nazi Party, also known as the Stormtroopers and the Brown Shirts for the color of their uniform, had marched through the streets of Frankfurt wearing swastika armbands and singing loudly, "When Jewish blood spurts from the knife, things will go well again." They became even more concerned when the Nazi regime quickly began to restrict the civil and human rights of the Jews, who according to the census of June 16, 1933, accounted for less than 0.8% of the total population of 67 million. On the 25th of April 1933, the Nazi German government issued a law against overcrowding in schools and universities, which dramatically limited the number of Jewish students attending public schools. According to this new law, the number of Jewish students, such as Margot, in any one public school could not exceed more than 5% of the total student population. Only those Jewish students whose fathers had participated in World War I or who had a gentile parent or two non-Jewish grandparents were not affected. This law, however, did not stand alone, and it was followed by other measures. In addition, public schools played an important role in spreading Nazi ideas to the German youth. Teachers taught students love for Hitler, obedience to state authority, militarism, racism, and antisemitism. As a result, Jews in Germany turned increasingly to private schools for their children, and tens of thousands of them decided to leave Germany. The Franks belonged to the latter group and decided to move to the Netherlands. In September 1933, Otto Frank founded a franchise for the Amsterdam branch of the Opekta company that traded in pectin, a gelling agent for making jam. The rest of the family moved to Amsterdam soon after. Margot was 7 years old when she moved to Amsterdam in December 1933, followed by her sister, Anne, in February 1934. The Franks were among 300,000 Jews who fled from Nazi Germany between 1933 and 1939. After their experiences with the Third Reich, the family soon felt at home in Amsterdam. They made new friends, and despite initial problems with the Dutch language, they became excellent students, especially Margot. Her parents felt that a regular Dutch primary school in their own neighborhood would be best for her, and Margot enrolled in an elementary school close to their new address in the southern part of Amsterdam. She picked up a new language very quickly, and at the end of the school year, she already scored 3 on a scale of 5. After primary school, Margot went to the Municipal Lyceum for Girls, where she excelled too. Her report marks were consistently high. She did well in science and math, scoring 9 on a scale of 10 in mathematics, and according to her school friend, even though Margot was the best at everything, she remained modest. While the girls seemed to be happy about their new life in their new country, for their parents, the situation was more challenging. Otto had to work hard to get his company going and build a new life for his family. However, the financial situation of the family improved in 1938 when Otto started a new company called Pecticon, which was a wholesaler of herbs and spices. Seeing the development in Nazi Germany and its aggressive expansion, Otto even wanted to set up a new business in Great Britain and move there, but this plan did not work out. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939. Margot was well aware of the threat of war, which she expressed in her letter sent to a fellow student in the United States with whom she made contact thanks to her English teacher. In the only letter she managed to send, 2 weeks before the German invasion of the Netherlands, she wrote how they often listened to the radio during these stressful times and never felt safe as the Netherlands was a small country bordering directly with Nazi Germany. Margot Frank was 14 years old when Germany invaded the Netherlands on the 10th of May 1940. The life of the Franks, who were once again under Nazi domination, changed completely. The criminal Nazi regime from which they ran away in 1933 finally caught up with them in the country which became their home and had made them feel free to live their own life. The Netherlands became an occupied territory, and it did not take long for the Nazis to begin introducing new anti-Semitic laws and regulations restricting the lives of Jews. Jewish civil servants were fired, and Jewish businesses, as well as the Jews themselves, had to be registered. They could no longer visit parks, cinemas, or non-Jewish shops. Many places thus became off-limits to Margot, who could no longer go to the same school, as all Jewish children had to go to separate Jewish schools. She had to leave the Lyceum for girls and transfer to the Jewish Lyceum, where she excelled too. Margot, who had a large circle of friends, also had to give up playing tennis and rowing, as Jews were no longer allowed to play sports. According to the new laws, Jews were no longer allowed to run their own businesses, and the Nazis forced Otto Frank to give up his companies. However, Otto had managed to transfer control of his businesses to his employees soon enough to keep his companies out of Nazi hands. The situation got worse in 1941, when Jewish men were arrested during raids and then deported to the Mauthausen concentration camp. Among them were friends and acquaintances of the Franks, and reports of their deaths would soon follow. Otto understood that the situation was critical and tried to emigrate to the United States and Cuba. However, he never managed to obtain the necessary documents. It was in the spring of 1942 when Otto Frank, anticipating deportation of his own family, decided to set up a hiding place in an empty part of his business premises at Prinsengracht 263. Regulations, which forced Jews to wear a yellow badge in the form of a Star of David as a means of identification, were announced in the Netherlands on the 29th of April 1942. Those caught without a badge after the 5th of May when they came into effect were arrested and detained for a 6-week period. The systematic deportation of Dutch Jews to death camps started in the summer of 1942. Transports regularly left the transit camps of Westerbork and Vught. Out of 140,000 Jews who lived in the Netherlands by the beginning of the Second World War, 107,000, including little children, were deported mostly for Auschwitz and Sobibor by September 1944. Out of 107,000, only 5,000 returned after the war. Before going into hiding, the 12th of June 1942 was probably the last happy moment for the Frank family. It was the day when Margot's sister, Anne, celebrated her 13th birthday and received her diary. A diary which would one day make her famous, and in which she would write about the difficult times that were to come. Less than 1 month later, on the 5th of July 1942, Margot received a call-up to report for a so-called labor camp in Nazi Germany. Knowing the fate of their friends and acquaintances who had been sent to such camps and never returned, the Franks did not hesitate for a moment. The next morning, they went into hiding in order to escape persecution. In the Secret Annex, the family would spend 761 long days. After 7 days, the Franks were joined by the Van Pels family, made up of Hermann, August, and 16-year-old Peter. In November, they were joined by Fritz Pfeffer, a dentist and family friend. While in the beginning, Margot shared a room with her sister, from the moment Fritz Pfeffer joined them, she had to sleep in her parents' room. This must not have been easy for a 16-year-old girl. It is thanks to Anne's diary that we know how the Frank family and 4 others lived for more than 2 years in a 3-story space entered through a revolving bookcase. The people in hiding were completely dependent on 6 helpers. They were employees and friends of Margot's father, who provided food, clothing, and everything necessary to the 8 people in the Secret Annex between 1942 and 1944. It is thanks to Anne's diary that we can get a glimpse into the everyday life of the people in hiding. It was important to be silent, especially from 8:30 a.m. when the men in the warehouse, which was located below the secret annex, started their workday. Any sound could cause suspicion. The morning was devoted to reading, studying, and preparing for their lunch break. At 12:30 p.m., when the warehouse workers went home for lunch, a few of the helpers came up to the secret annex to have lunch with those in hiding. Mépris usually stayed in the office to keep an eye on things. The people in hiding could see other faces and listen to the Radio Oranje, which was a program broadcasted by the BBC, where the Dutch Queen Wilhelmina, who on the 13th of May 1940 had escaped from the invading German troops and travelled to England, spoke 34 times during the course of the war. While in the afternoon, some people in hiding took a nap. Margot, just like her sister Anne, used to write in her own diary or study. According to Anne's diary, Margot studied everything from English, French and Latin to biology and economics, and she also helped Fritz Pfeffer with his Dutch. Margot also took a correspondence course in Latin under the name of Beb Voskuil, one of the helpers. While Anne wanted to become a writer and journalist, Margot saw a future for herself as a maternity nurse in Palestine. The sisters and other members of the secret annex then had a cup of coffee, prepared for dinner, and at 5:30 p.m., when the warehouse workers went home, they could leave the secret annex and spread out through the building. They would cook dinner and take turns using the bathroom as they did in the morning before the warehouse workers started their working day. In the evenings, Margot and Anne, who got along well with each other, used to read parts of each other's diary. According to Mépris, one of the helpers, Margot was very quiet and withdrawn in the secret annex. When Anne and Peter, from whom Anne would receive her first kiss, fell in love, Margot felt very alone. When Anne suspected that her sister also had feelings for Peter, Margot denied this. In a short note to Anne, Margot, then a teenager, wrote, "I only feel a bit sorry that I haven't found anyone yet, and am not likely to for the time being, with whom I can discuss thoughts and feelings." While Anne was determined and often spoke her mind, Margot was more modest and tolerant. This could be the reason why Margot had a better relationship with their mother than Anne did. Before the family moved into the secret annex, Margot, the same as her mother, had become involved in Amsterdam's liberal Jewish community. She also took Hebrew classes, attended synagogue, and in 1941 joined a Dutch Zionist club for young people who wanted to emigrate to Palestine to found a Jewish state. The situation for hidden Dutch Jews became more dangerous after September 1942, when special units were formed, made up of Dutch collaborators that began hunting for hiding Jews. An estimated 25,000 Jews went into hiding in the Netherlands. 2/3 of them survived, and 1/3 were betrayed and discovered. To this day, we do not know the reason for the police raid, but the hiding period for the 8 people in the secret annex came to an abrupt end on the 4th of August 1944. Dutch police officers, who arrested Margot and the others in hiding, were headed by an Austrian SS officer, Karl Silberbauer. 2 of the helpers were arrested too. One of them, Victor Kugler, remembered how Margot was weeping silently during the arrest. While Silberbauer confiscated their valuables and money, he scattered out the papers and notebooks. After people from the secret annex were then taken to the Gestapo headquarters in Amsterdam, 2 other helpers took the documents before the secret annex was emptied by the order of the Nazis. While Anne's diary and other manuscripts survived, Margot's diary was lost. From a prison in Amsterdam, they were sent to the Westerbork transit camp. They ended up in the prison barracks, and the men and women were separated. Otto had to work during the day, but in the evening he could be with Edith, Margot and Anne. On the 3rd of September 1944, they were deported to the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. Their train was the last one to leave Westerbork for this extermination camp, located in Nazi-occupied Poland. The train journey took 3 horrible days, during which Margot and over 1,000 others were packed closely together in cattle wagons. There was very little food and water, and only a barrel for a toilet. Upon arrival at Auschwitz, Nazi doctors checked to see who would and who would not be able to do heavy forced labor. Around 350 people from Margot's transport were immediately taken to the gas chambers and murdered. In total, out of 1,019 Jews who were deported to Auschwitz together with the Franks, only 45 men and 82 women survived. While Otto ended up in a camp for men, his wife and daughters were sent to the labor camp for women. Margot, chosen for slave labor, was forced to cut sods or carry stones. After the war, survivors described Margot, Anne, and their mom Edith as an inseparable trio. Otto, would never see them again. When on the night of the 1st of November 1944, Margot and Anne were deported to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, their parents stayed behind at Auschwitz. Edith died of weakness and disease on the 6th of January 1945, 3 weeks before the Red Army liberated the camp. Sanitary conditions at Bergen-Belsen were terrible, and there was no water for washing and hardly enough for drinking and cooking. Between January and March 1945, when the prisoners were sent on death marches from the other concentration camps, about 1/3 of the prisoners who arrived in the transports were already dead, and almost 80% of the rest had to be fetched by truck from the station as they were too weak and sick to walk. On one occasion, out of a transport of 1,900 inmates, over 500 arrived dead. The prisoners got almost no food during these death marches, and there was no food when they arrived at the camp either. The camp was so overcrowded that during the winter months when it was freezing cold, the prisoners had to sleep in a sitting position on the floor and somehow try to share only 200 blankets in a camp of tens of thousands of prisoners. Due to starvation, thirst, and the outbreak of typhus epidemics, the average daily mortality rate of the prisoners was between 250 and 300. When Margot and Anne arrived at Bergen-Belsen, they met a few Dutch friends. It is thanks to them that we know the details of their time in this camp. After Anne met one of them and told her that they did not have any food or warm clothes, her friend promised to help. On the following day, Anne's friend threw her a package containing a cookie, socks, and gloves. However, when she threw it over the barbed wire fence, a woman standing next to Anne caught the package. The woman, hungry and desperate, refused to return it and took it for herself instead. When after a few days they tried the same thing again, Anne finally caught the package and kept it for Margot and herself. But unfortunately, in the camp's terrible conditions, Anne and Margot contracted typhus. Their sisters also reunited with Nanetta Blitz, who survived the Holocaust and described Anne as bald, emaciated, and shivering. She added that Anne did not wish to live any longer, as she believed that both her parents were dead. Another inmate later testified how both Margot and Anne had had faces looking like skin over bone. They were terribly cold, as they were placed in the most unfavorable place of the barracks, downstairs next to the door. The survivor added how during the cold winter, they had to shout all the time, "Close the door, close the door." However, that sound became weaker every day. According to Genna Turgel, another survivor of Bergen-Belsen who worked in the camp hospital and helped the sisters, Anne was delirious, terrible, and burning up. Genna also brought Anne water with which to wash. But unfortunately, the sisters did not survive. Margot, who was in a weakened state, died when she fell from her bunk onto a cold stone floor. She was killed by the shock. Anne died shortly after Margot. They were then buried in one of the camp's mass graves by Jannie and Lynn Brillesleper, the two Dutch Jews whom the late sisters had met and befriended at Westerbork concentration camp in the Netherlands before their deportation to Auschwitz. Margot and Anne both died in February 1945, owing to the effects of typhus. It was initially believed that the sisters died a few weeks before the camp's liberation, on the 15th of April 1945. However, it was later revealed that they may have died as early as February. Because we do not know the exact date of Margot's death, she was either 18 or 19 years old at the time. Her birthday was the same month that she died. Anne was 15. Margot and Anne were among the millions of victims who were sentenced to death by starvation, thirst, illness, ill treatment, or extermination with Zyklon B gas. However, there was one person from the Secret Annex who did survive. It was Otto, Margot's father. He was liberated on the 27th of January 1945 when the Soviets entered Auschwitz. On the way back to the Netherlands, he found out that his wife Edith had died, but he hoped that Anne and Margot had somehow survived. He returned to the liberated Netherlands on the 3rd of June 1945, 9 days before what would have been Anne's 16th birthday. All hope was lost 1 month later when he learned about the death of his daughters from Jannie Brillesleper, who together with her sister Lynn had been with Margot and Anne until the end. Miep Gies, one of the helpers of the Secret Annex, passed him Anne's diary. After he found enough courage to read it, he was astonished by her writing. He also read about Anne's dreams to become a writer and journalist, and her intention to publish her stories about their life in the Secret Annex after the war would be over. In the end, at least Anne's dreams would come true, and the world learned about her story, as well as that of her sister Margot and other members of the Secret Annex. First, 3,000 copies of Anne's book, Secret Annex, were published in 1947. Since then, the book has been translated in over 70 languages. People all over the world were introduced to Anne's story, and in 1960, the hiding place, which for 2 years became the home to 8 people who tried to survive the atrocities of the criminal Nazi regime, became a museum, the Anne Frank House. Today, you can visit the house in which Margot and Anne spent 761 days. You can also see Anne's room that has walls brightened with picture postcards and movie stars which Anne collected, and see her original diary and other manuscripts which she wrote until her arrest. Today, Margot Frank is best known as the sister of Anne, forever standing in her shadow. We can only wonder if she would have been as famous as Anne if her diary had survived the raid in the Secret Annex. When Margot perished in the death camp in 1945, she was a young woman. She had to die only because she was Jewish. We must never forget the Holocaust and keep alive the memory of people like Margot and Anne, who have both become symbols of the Holocaust. We must remember them and make them live forever in order to remind us of the dangers of discrimination, racism, and hatred towards each other, as history often seeks to repeat itself. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Please help us to create more videos by clicking on the donation link. Thank you, and see you next time on the channel.